The Forum on the Family is one of the premier family conferences held each year with international and national speakers and political leaders. Hosted by Family First New Zealand, the Forum brings together a national network of family-focused organisations, scholars, lobby groups, church leaders and community groups who are part of a growing movement to bring New Zealand to a point where families are strengthened, marriage is honoured, life is protected and religious freedom is defended. This year's conference will again be held at the Dewdrop Event Centre in Manukau City, not too far from the Auckland Airport, on Thursday 28th of August and Friday 29th of August. Yes, because of demand, we're starting the conference earlier with 3 important sessions and a time of networking on the Thursday evening, and then a full-day program all day Friday. This year's theme is Courage at a Cultural Tipping Point. The culture is slowly but surely waking up to the harmful effects of the radical left-wing agenda and the destruction of family values that we all hold dear. Some countries have even figured out how to define a woman. And at this year's conference, once again, we have an amazing lineup of brave speakers from the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Dr. Miriam Grossman last spoke at our forum in 2012. You may also recognise her from the recent Daily Wire documentary, What is a Woman? But more recently, she's released an important book on the transgender agenda. I'll be doing a live interview with Dr. Grossman from New York, where she is based. Jeff Johnson is an issues analyst for Focus on the Family in the United States. We're also very excited to have Dawn Hawkins discussing the issue of pornography and sexual exploitation. From Canada, we have Amanda Ackman bringing us a warning about the slippery slope of euthanasia. From Australia, we have Kirralie Smith, a wife, a mother, and an activist for biology and truth, but who is paying the price for speaking up. And for the first time in New Zealand, you will get to hear their side of the story. Israel and Maria Folau. Now, we're hoping that they'll be able to attend in person. They're keen to be here, but it does depend on Israel's rugby schedule in Japan. But either way, we'll get to hear from them personally and not via the hostile mainstream media. And finally, we're hosting and recording a special episode of StraightTalk before a live audience at the conference. It'll be a lively discussion and you can be part of that live audience. I want to invite you to this year's Forum on the Family. It starts Thursday night, 28th, 6 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. and then all day Friday, 29th from 8:45 a.m. through to 4:30 p.m. It's the highlight of the year and you don't want to miss it. Arrange to be there. Book your flights today. Gather your friends. If you're concerned for our culture, our country and our families, you may be saying, what can I do? Well, step 1, attend the Forum on the Family. Have your spine stiffened by some fabulous speakers who will encourage, equip and inspire you. Now, the last couple of years have been sellouts, so don't delay. Go to our website, forumonthefamily.nz, for all the information you need. Register today. Don't miss this important family conference. Go to forumonthefamily.nz. Register today. Hello New Zealand, I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk. This is episode number 79. Tonight we discuss, can the behaviour of our politicians sink any lower? I'll definitely be putting that question to Simon O'Connor. Digital IDs from the devil. There's strong support for alcohol law reform, so what would our panellists like to see in changes to alcohol laws? And New Zealand has received a report card for child wellbeing from UNICEF. It makes depressing reading. What's the solution? And if we have time, we'll find out what the panellists would put in the budget this week if they were the Minister of Finance. Anyway, let's meet the panel without further ado. And firstly, Elliot Ikele, who I think is once again travelling the world on his junket. Where are you this week? Where are you, Wally?
I am just across the road from Te Papa Museum, so I am in Wellington, in the capital.
Lucky you. Okay, lucky you. One museum you'll never find me in. And just just on the left, but not thinking on the left, is Susie Miller. How are you, Susie?
I'm good, thank you. I'm just across the road from the Marerewa Dairy.
Okay, okay, that sounds much more at home. To the place where it never gets dark, and that's Canterbury, and Dr. Michael Reid. How are you, Michael?
G'day, Bob. G'day, everyone.
And finally in Auckland is Simon O'Connor. How are you, Simon? I hope you're behaving. Well, you're not a politician now, so you must be.
Well, yeah. I don't have to admit to behaving good or otherwise, but I'm just so pleased you and I text each other like, Bob, are you wearing black? I'm wearing black. You know, here we go.
We are the All Blacks. There we are. Fantastic. Right. Video of the week. I'm just going to wind you guys up tonight. Firstly, has anybody actually published a book? Michael, you've published a book. I know that. It's on my shelf. Has anybody else? Simon, have you published a book? Yes, I've read it. I want you to do an update, actually. It's a very good book. Anyway, the video of the week, one of them is a certain person receiving her brand new copies.
The moment of the big unboxing of my book. You'd think that I would have prepared by getting cutting knives and scissors instead of a pen.
Here it comes. Here comes the book.
This is just to build the anticipation. Oh my goodness. There it is. There it is.
Lovely. Lovely. Has anybody had that sensation? Michael, you have? Did you sort of put on all your social media opening the first box of books?
It was published before social media was a thing, Bob, so it probably does need an update.
Yeah, I think it was handwritten and photocopied, actually. Anyway, look, just to make you guys feel better, Adi Savia continues to really set the pace in the rugby at the moment, and just after beating the Blues, he was interviewed. Great interview, have a watch.
From you and your team, just what does this mean to you and this group?
Take it for love, Jeff.
Get your breath back.
I just want to give thanks and all glory to Jesus. Without him, we wouldn't be where we are today. And
We talked to Tana Umanga after games, and he talks about belief. Is all this team needed a little bit of belief to get where they deserve to be?
all we need is a little bit of faith, and we let God do the rest. And that's what we're doing. We're controlling what we can control, and we're letting the rest just happen with the Holy Spirit.
Well, there we are. There's a Trinity in one interview, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Go, Artie. Just finding one more video. Very important speech today at Yale University. I really am winding you guys up, aren't I? Apparently, the world is now a dumpster fire. Apparently. We have a right to be who we are. And apparently, there is a Declaration of Human Rights, but not for the unborn. See if you can stomach this.
But as I sat down to pen these words, that suddenly didn't feel enough. Not when the world, over the course of a few short months, moved from tumultuous to an all-out dumpster fire. The daily reminder of climate change that bangs on our door but falls on deaf ears at the highest echelons of power. Challenges to rules around trade, increases in migration flows, and a decreasing regard for civil rights and human rights, including the right to be who you are. Not to mention an environment rife with myths and disinformation, fueling not what I would characterise as polarisation, but entrenchment. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was presented to the UN, it was one of America's great wartime leaders, Secretary Marshall, who cautioned that not only does the systematic and deliberate denial of basic human rights lie at the root of most of our troubles, but they have repercussions.
I just wanted to play that because now everybody will really appreciate you as panelists, team.
Why?
Okay.
Why, Bob? Why?
No
Look, I
warning,
reduced a 30-minute speech down to 1 minute, so you can be grateful to me. Alfred Naro is certain that this is all part of a play that the media are working on of reintroducing Jacinda Ardern to replace Chris Hipkins and to stand at the next election. You agree with that, Simon?
No. Look, no. All respect to Alfred, but she's not coming back. I mean, amongst other things, she's more than happy to address the woke crowds at Yale and others and just emote. It's painful, I have to say. But, it's a good reminder of why we didn't like her and we got rid of her. It's just completely full of it. And, good riddance. But actually, to be fair, I'm happy she's delighted in her book. I don't want to read it. I don't think it's worth reading. But you know what? As a human being, she's worked hard to put it together, so we can give her kudos there. But it's a good reminder why we're happy to have Jacinda gone from this country.
Well, I am going to read the book because I'm just going to Google Simon O'Connor, Elliot Ikele, Susan Miller and Michael Reid just to see if you guys are mentioned. I won't be because I'm not important enough. Anyway, let's move on to bad behaviour in Parliament. Can it get any worse? It really sort of started with a particular Green MP, Julianne Genter, who absolutely lost her rag in Parliament.
Ms Genter, please resume your seat. Please resume your seat.
Yeah, so she ran across and stood over a national MP and just ranted. And then, of course, we had this. Okay, and then we had this. This was just last week. This was pretty stroppy from Willie Jackson.
What about what's happening politically in this Parliament in terms of certain members? That was at the court in the quarter today. No, I'm not sitting down. I'm not sitting down. I'm not sitting down. You don't walk over our kaupapa as it suits you, Mr. Speaker.
Leave the House, Mr. Jackson. Leave the House, Mr. Jackson. Leave the House, Mr. Jackson.
Who do you think you are?
Leave the House, Mr. Jackson.
Who do you think you are? Simon, have you ever said that to the Speaker of the House? When the Speaker of the House stands up, that's like, you shut up, hey? That's a rule.
Oh, look, it is. I mean, this is just the arrogance of these activists. They are so beholden to their own perspectives that they just don't tolerate anyone else's. And they need to be seen, Bob, for the radical, dangerous fundamentalists they are, because they're the first. Willie Jackson and the Māori Party and others are the first to tell you about tikanga and protocol and respect, but they show absolutely none. And that's because they're zealots. The radicals, the fundamentalists, the anarchists, every other word. In fact, if you want better words, turn to Elliot. He's far more evocative than I am.
Actually, I just play one more clip, and then Susie, I'm keen to get your response. I mean, people are concerned about misogynistic abuse to female MPs. We discussed it a couple of weeks ago. One MP gets it, Brooke Van Velden, and she starts to push back. You'll be pleased to know that we have vetted the offensive word in her response, but the substance of her response is exactly what needs to be said.
And I do not agree with the clearly gendered and patronising language that Andrea Vance used to reduce senior cabinet ministers to girl bosses, hype squads, references to girl math and the women of this government are hardworking, dedicated and strong. No woman in this parliament, nor in this country, should be subjected to sex-based discrimination. And it's a very curious feminist moment when a former Minister for Women repeats parts of a clearly misogynistic article in this House.
Good. Okay, Susie is the adult human female on the panel tonight. Could you just explain what's going on in Parliament? Why is the behaviour... I mean, you're actually a trustee on a primary school board of trustees. I mean, you wouldn't even accept that behaviour in the classroom, would you?
No, of course not. If you can't handle the gender, like, just don't put your hand up to be in Parliament, is what I say. It's interesting that it's called misogyny when it's females throwing these words around at each other. It's crazy. I think elitism, entitlement, activism, that seems to be Parliament's kaupapa right now. And I just can't see a lot of servant-hearted people there to serve the nation. And, you know, I know Winston put his head in his hands in defeat and just, you know, he must be thinking, how did we get here? And this should probably be a moment for all of us to put our head in our hands and reflect upon what is going on with our people. I guess, weak times need strong men and strong people. And like I would probably send the message to women in Parliament, just man up. You're in the big boys playground now. If you're going to be there, just handle the jandal. And I may not be in Parliament, but I can, maintain a culture that shows values like honour, strength, and integrity in any context that I'm in, board meetings, any conversations that I'm in. We just need to model better for our young people, for the generations coming.
Yeah.
I just feel like mainstream media, they have no morals, only ideologies, and government officials have no business mirroring their behaviour, bringing their words into Parliament. Like you could have just referenced it. We all know what you were talking about, but it's crazy. And
Michael, go on.
No, carry on. No, carry on. I was just thinking about Te Pāti Māori's proposed punishment, and I just think.
Okay, let me come back to that one, Michael. When you've observed Parliament for quite a while. I mean, you were in Maxim Institute many years ago. You must have seen the decline in standards and behaviour. Is it just Parliament that's declined, or do you think it's just society in general?
Culture that it represents, of course. And I think from when I first seriously started following politics, I've seen a decline in a genuine understanding of public interest. We don't have a public interest now. That's why we shouldn't have a publicly funded state broadcaster in RNZ or TVNZ, because there's no public interest to defend or promote, I would argue. And so if there's no public interest, then we can't really get beyond, or all we're left with party politics and factional and combative interests to be promoted. And so to my observation, Parliament's become just not a debating chamber. It's not about a genuine exchange of ideas and pursuit of truth. It's about banging your drum as loud as you can and shouting the other side down. And so I think it has got worse, Bob. Can it get worse? Perhaps not in degree, but in frequency. I think it is really a microcosm of the sort of factions that we have in our wider society. I think Brooke was rightly responding to the provocation, but the use of the C word, no, that's never justified, Bob. That's never justified. And other pundits and commentators have said, yes, it is. No, it's not. And is the media to blame? Well, they say they want to focus on the issue of the government legislation, but they actually loved the sensation of Andrea Vance and Brooke Van Velden. Angry Vice, I think she should be called, rather than Andrea Vance. But they loved the sensation, and so they were guilty of jumping in to sensationalise it. So yeah, the media has a big role in this. And I think with Te Pāti Māori, I mean, they literally play to the cameras, and the more they can display their ethno-anarchism, the better they think things are for them. But it's not like that. So it's in a pretty dire situation, Bob. Has it got worse? Yes, I think it has. Will it get worse? Well, in frequency, I think. Yeah, but not in degree. It's pretty bad.
Okay, Elliot, this was a response of Te Pāti Māori to getting suspended for getting in the face of other politicians and intimidating them, pointing guns and generally misbehaving.
Been punished for being Māori. The country loves my haka. The world loves my haka. But it feels like they don't love me. And that's they love my reo, but they don't love me.
They still see us as a bunch of unruly people that they need to put back into order.
What do you reckon, Elliot?
This is very much modus operandi for these people. When you talk about cry bullies, race hustlers, and race baiters, this is, if you were unaware of the style of activities that people like this do, then you can be very forgiven for feeling in a certain way sympathetic to the cause. But for those of us who have seen their clear examples in other international, this is a very much an imported way of doing things. So they have engaged in some horrific levels of defamation. They've also engaged in that whole pointing the gun finger at someone, as well as even there's a little threat that was going on in terms of poison berries being given to David Seymour. So there are some really horrific elements there. In terms of the haka itself, it was improperly done, but it was very cleverly done as well. What they did was they did a Greta Thunberg. So they basically put Hannah out the front as a human ideological shield because she's young and female, so that anyone who wanted to come across that, they're going to be called racist or ageist or anything like that. The haka was actually quite shockingly done. Anyway, that is not the way any haka should be done or the reason for it to be done. And on top of that, it was done as a hissy fit because there was the proper format of Parliament. It was not going their way. So instead of engaging in the proper format, they ended up having a hissy fit by starting their haka. Very planned, of course. And then when the suspension goes out, of course, they ran away from the suspension. They held their own area, all of that sort of stuff. So when the Camerons finally go on there with a sympathetic voice in their ear, that's where the tears come out. The cry bully aspect comes out. Those who engage in some horrific behaviour, when they can, then they put on the tears, the crocodile tears, and it all comes out. Because don't forget, after this, they have their speech in Parliament, and he starts off teary, and he goes into this strong attempt to look like some type of demagogue. But for those of us who know what it looks like, it was vacuous. It was very much fake to many of us. So it's quite horrific. I do want to point out that Willie Jackson, the behavior that you'll see from Willie Jackson is only because Willie Jackson is quite opportunistic. If everyone behaves, Willie Jackson will behave. If everyone starts to go unhinged and start to pull apart at the seams, Willie Jackson will jump on the same thing. He's done this throughout his radio career as well as political career. Yeah. So all of this is imported and expected.
Simon, there's the boiling frog concept that if you sit amongst it, you actually don't notice how bad it's getting. You had 12 years sitting amongst it. Did you notice it getting worse over that time, or has it just slowly creeped up?
No, I did see it getting worse, bit by bit. The standards were relaxed from everything from dress, and let's not get too obsessed with what people wear per se, but we also know that it sets a particular level of standard and expectation. That went out the window. The parliamentary prayer went out the window. What was tolerated within the House began to change. It was very, very obvious. And, I agree with Michael by, repetition or frequency, rather, it's going to get worse. But I'd also say it's going to get worse by substance. And until a firm line is drawn under this behaviour, you're going to see much, much worse. There'll be more haka, there'll be more abuse, there'll be eventually violence, there'll be more punch-ups. Well, actually, you can't say more. There's only been a couple, but there'll be more because no one's saying enough's enough. And Elliot and the others are right. This is all about theatrics. The Māori Party, the Greens, Willie Jackson, there's no substance behind them. It's just theatrics. It's to get a cheap headline, and the media indulge them because, the counterfactual's correct here. You don't hear ever from the MPs who give you well thought out, articulate speeches. It doesn't matter if they're from Labour, New Zealand First or National. There's many of them. They give really heartfelt, well thought out speeches. You'll never hear of them. But they will go after these nuts. So it's going to get worse until someone says enough's enough. But Michael's right, frequency. But I'm afraid to say, to be the pessimist, it's going to get worse in substance too.
Okay, well, let's go to the nice, warm, fuzzy pasta heart of Susie, even though she talked about the jandal. Is 21 days punishment for just doing a protest like that in Parliament, is that appropriate? I mean, we had Julianne Genter standing over a National MP and yelling at them. We had Brooke Van Velden saying the C word in Parliament. So are the Māori Party right that it's a bit of an overreaction for them?
Not at all. I mean, I heard Julianne Genter apologised for her actions. I think there's just no humility at all from the Te Pāti Māori Party, and I think it's a sad indictment for like their care for the younger generation. I object to the manipulation of young minds just with this whole message that they're like, if you want your way, have a hissy fit, have, like Elliot was saying, just throw your toys out of the box and just play up to the cameras. And it's a shocker. And so I really believe that there needs to be some kind of, punishment or something done here to acknowledge that this is not the way we do adult world. It's wrong.
Yeah.
Bob,
Okay, Michael, do you think it's fair?
Yeah, Bob, I think they needed much heavier censure. And just going back to Simon's point, until someone draws a line in the sand, and that should be Jerry Brownlee. I was going to say he's gutless, but I don't think we could say that about Jerry, really, at least in one sense. I mean, he's backpedaling. He's backpedaling a bit, isn't he? And it's his job, isn't it, Simon? It's his job to say this is not right. And even if he's not there, whoever the deputy speaker is. And I think these people should have been suspended without pay until they agree to respect Parliament and abide by its rules. And that sends the signal that this behaviour is not acceptable. And they can bleat on all they want, run to the media, get indulged, as you say, Simon. But I actually think the electorate would be right behind them if the Speaker took a firm stand.
Is Jerry Brownlee the problem, Simon? Because I interviewed Winston Peters at the end of last week. He said he reckons the slide started when Trevor Mallard was Speaker of the House.
It's threefold. I agree with the overall sentiments of Michael. Secondly, the slide did start with Trevor, but it's not to put all the blame on him. But to be fair, this is not Jerry's responsibility per se. This is the Privileges Committee. So what you'll see now with the Māori Party and the suspension for 3 weeks and so forth, that's decided by the senior MPs from every party within the Privileges Committee. That the Speaker doesn't have a direct say in that. How he reacts at the time is in Jerry's hands, but what you're seeing now is outside of his. So to be fair, it's not the Speaker's responsibility. In many ways, actually, it's the wider MPs, the wider Parliament, that's not quite a wet bus ticket, but I agree with Michael. I don't actually think 3 weeks suspension without pay is enough. Because people have to remember two things here. It's not because they did a haka. It's not because of the threatening nature of it per se. It's twofold. The first is they interrupted a vote. If they waited a minute later or a minute earlier, it wouldn't have been so problematic. But we're a democracy last time I checked, and votes are important. And the second is, and I think Susie talked about it, basically it's a giant middle finger to their colleagues at Parliament. They wouldn't turn up, they wouldn't discuss it, they just tried to reduce this to a race-based issue. The Maori Party are contemptuous of the very Parliament they're in. And for viewers to understand, they're more than happy to take, actually, as Maori Party co-leaders, they take over $200 and something thousand a year of a system they hate. And they basically shafted it. And that's why the Privileges Committee has thrown the book at them in the way they didn't to Julianne Genter. So we should have no sympathy for Te Pāti Māori. We should have no sympathy for their victim narrative. We should have no sympathy for their behaviour. They're just contemptuous, arrogant revolutionaries. And if they get what they want, this country will be unrecognisable.
Okay, and just finally, Elliot, just the hypocrisy has been interesting with the MPs. I saw Chloe Shawbrick on Q&A yesterday morning, and she was asked why had she been silent when other women MPs had been called the C word. Why hadn't she spoken up? This was her response.
As a prominent Wahine leader who has forcefully called out the use of sexist and gendered language in the past and trolling, where were you this week?
I was in the House as Brooke Van Velden decided to invoke that term, I believe quite cynically, unfortunately, to try and position herself as a victim.
Did you criticise the use of that term?
I haven't actually been asked about it. I'm more than happy to criticise the use of that term.
Yep, so she only speaks up when she's asked about it, apparently. That's a new one. But Elliot, it's the hypocrisy, I think, of the whole issue, hasn't it? I mean, you know, toxic masculinity, we've been told that that's misogyny towards female MPs and female media, and yet it's okay when they do it.
Yeah, I think with Chloe is quite vacuous. I've debated with her a few times on
Same.
stage, and she's actually quite vacuous. She will say only what she wants, and she'll only support her side. It's very much that's the only consistency that she has anything to do. So she will not hold to a decent position. So misogyny only if it's depending on her team. Everyone else can effectively go burn. I do want to point out that in terms of the slide, when Simon and the rest are bringing up people like Trevor Mallard, you had a bit of a perfect storm, and this is where I think we did see a very significant slide in the overall behaviour and the rationality in Parliament, which is Trevor Mallard, I regard as the worst speaker in New Zealand history, who was a part of the worst government in New Zealand history, far beyond, way worse than Muldoon. And we also had the worst leader in New Zealand history. And I think those three elements came together and have really done immeasurable damage to the honour, the mana of Parliament, to the kaupapa overall. And that's why we see a lot of the unhinged rants, the unhinged behaviour going on. In terms of the consequences for Te Pāti Māori, I actually think that it's appropriate for this one incident, as in the hissy haka and them not turning up, because Hannah got 7 days because she had showed some remorse and the other two did not. But it's important that every single time the racist people from Te Pāti Māori engage, they have to be smacked every single time. They have to be consequence, and the consequence harder and harder and harder. And I think that would actually bring the behaviour back into some type of normality.
Okay, we're going to move on. Topic number 2, and we're talking about social media bans for young children. It's been argued that digital IDs for children would help us protect them from unregulated and harmful social media. But then we'd all have to possibly have digital IDs. And, well, are digital IDs from the devil? They have benefits like streamlined access and security, but they raise concerns about privacy, potential misuse, and, of course, government overreach. And we're all a bit nervous about that after COVID. So, Michael, I might start with you. I guess my concern is that people are raising the issue of digital IDs and saying we shouldn't even discuss protecting kids on social media because digital IDs, let's kick the whole issue down the road. I think somehow there's got to be a middle ground. What do you think?
Well, Bob, I think we do need the wider issue of young people and social media, and we're very aware of the damage that social media can cause and a whole raft of issues. So it's actually really good to talk about it, and adults wanting to protect children and young people from harm is a really good thing. Do we need digital IDs? I actually don't think so. I think it's another sort of Orwellian thing. And the genie's out of the bottle, Bob, with social media, and banning it also for under 16s is a good idea, and that will appeal to many people, but it's actually unenforceable. And do we need it? I don't think so. I think the real solution is parental authority and guidelines. And, government can't make us good, Bob. That's civil society 101. And, we've lost any concept of that. And so, politicians look for solutions with new laws and amendments to laws. But we actually need to understand and respect parental authority and guidelines, and support parents as the first educators of their kids, and give them, I don't know what it looks like, but all the support and structure around them to help them to be good parents. And, I think that's the root of the problem.
Okay, Simon, haven't we already lost the argument if we've got a passport, because we've already got a digital ID that we're quite happy with? Some of us use Real Me. Some of us have licenses that we use as proof of who we are. So haven't we already broken the bridge on this, or broken down the door, and actually this is just part of protecting kids is more important now?
We've broken the bridge, if you will. I mean, we are quite prepared to share elements of our lives, as you say, our passports, a driver's license, if you use something called Real Me with your banks. But what's been asked for here is much more in depth. It goes much, much deeper and much, much wider. And you and I have talked about this. I mean, I'm all for protecting the under 16-year-old. Jonathan Haidt and others, they were at the forum last year. Family First, we've talked about this a lot. The evidence is clear of the harm to the young ones. And I know I'm repeating it again. It's not just the young ones accessing violent or pornographic material. It's simply just being on the internet, accessing social media. The harms are clear. So we need to address that. But I, for one, am nervous about government overreach here. To protect 16-year-olds requires all of us to be identified. And, you have to begin to think, and dare I hark back to COVID days, but every app you use, every message you put out can be sourced and tracked back to you. As conservatives, we often come under fire for our views. You have to imagine a world where all and everything you do is trackable, and then there are consequences. So I think we're right to be nervous, but I think we can find an accommodation, and maybe that's my last point. I don't think we should capitulate on how we protect our, young people, because it's too hard and digital IDs make it too hard. But we shouldn't capitulate either just for the populist, I hate that phrase, I'm going to use it, but the populist drive at the moment to protect young people, to actually give away some of our fundamental rights around privacy. So it's fraught, and I am a little worried. Maybe I will finish on it. I'm a little worried about the spin and the narrative. It's all a bit too slick at the moment from the government and the chosen groups who are now being fated to speak out on this. It's just all a bit too slick, and that requires us to have a little bit more conversation and reflection.
I mean, Susie, I actually think I've got a special app just so I can remember all my passwords. So the thought of having it all in one place and having a digital ID and maybe basing it on my eyes, it's actually quite attractive, because I did read a survey that a third of people have gone to great lengths to try and recover their lost password. And I think the other 2/3 were lying. So we've all been there, done that. Digital ID is actually quite attractive. So are you concerned about it?
Yeah, it's in Revelation. No, I mean, your question, are digital IDs from the devil? At the first just view, it's kind of a convenient consolidating of all your information for a cyber hacker to get. Like they just get you once, and they've got everything. And it is more sinister, like Simon was alluding to. You're going to have all your health information on there, your vaccination status and all that kind of thing. So, like Revelations 13 says there's going to be some sort of ID mark, and that'll allow you to buy and sell. And it's just government overreach. Government control does not turn into self-control. Like, that's up to, a person to regulate themselves. And as usual, like, humanism presents these solutions, but it's just all Marxism. And it's just, like Revelation says, behind it all is the worship of Satan. And we're in a society where pop culture music, the industry is unashamed, is blatantly satanic. So all of these ideas, they kind of will melt into all of the societal like norms of just being like straight, like, who cares? Anything goes. And I think if we're awake, if we're actually really, the woke, I object to that use of woke, because I'm like, the awake people are the people who are actually listening to God and listening to the Holy Spirit. But anyway, so that digital ID smells like another step in the direction of those kind of prophecies. And if you want all of that stuff to kind of go by the wayside, you should watch who you vote for. At the next election, people, if you're voting for who gives you the most lollies, you're enabling all of this kind of overreach and government control in our lives. And so just stop it right now if you can.
We might come back to lollies when we talk about the budget. But Elliot, In terms of there is a trade-off, isn't there? There's this trade-off about wanting to keep our kids safe. I mean, it is true. The reason we need to have this response is because we've lost our way as a culture of what is right and what is protective for our kids. And we've got all these groups that are trying to pollute our kids with ideologies and agendas and relationship, sexuality and education and social media. So Susie's right, but we've got to respond in some way. So is digital ID from the devil, or is it actually a possible solution?
There's a three-phase there. If you accept that digital IDs are good for our kids or good for us or good for society, what you're saying is that you implicitly trust the government wholesale 100%, and that the government will always have your best interests at heart. And if you believe that, I think that's silly, but that's your belief. That is what you're saying. Now, in terms of the how do we protect our kids? I should go back to when I was part of that political crew, and one of our policies was around pornography. And the idea there was to say that you eat pornography, freedom of speech, you can have it, but pornography, one of our policies was that all pornography, anything labeled even closely to it, was shut off. But you could have it if the bill payer said, yes, you can bring that on in. And then it's actually up to each one of the families to regulate it. And if the children are accessing some bad things, well, it's on the parents' head. It's on their behalf. But that way it would be more equal, and you'd be empowering the families to protect their own children. In terms of how do we protect our kids from all these other areas, I mean, no flattery at all. But just to the audience, you need family first. You need these conservative speakers out there. We need to have these NGOs who truly have families and children at their best of heart. I don't say that in a flattery sense. I say it as a need for our society. Bob, the family first and your crew are needed in our society. And again, I don't say that as flattery. I'm saying it as a requirement for society. And I think that's actually the best way we can do it, is by those who care to be out there educating us.
Okay, I'm just noting down that we're going to invite Elliot back, Simon, because he's really good on the panel.
I won't say I gave him $1,000 in US cash, unsequential $20 notes to say that.
Okay, Susie, I do just want to ask you as the mum, though, one of the arguments is that we do need this state to bring in some laws around social media and age restrictions, just like we do with alcohol, with tattoos, with gambling, with driving cars, because that adds weight to what the parents are trying to enforce. So when you say to your child, no, you cannot have social media because it's illegal, you're not 16 yet, that helps the parents. Do you think there's some merit to that argument, that it is good when the state backs up our approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a parent, it's really good to, like in the case of, restricted driving, just be like, no, you can't do that. You'll get caught by the cops. Obviously, in the social media world, it's different. But I think if we can help out by getting people like Meta and TikTok to only allow new youth accounts with the approval of verified parents, that all helps just a kid understand that there are boundaries to this, and there's some kind of good fears around this that your parent has. I also want to point out that there are already plenty of resources, even government funded. There's a Keep It Real online website that links to Internet Matters and NetSafe. And so there's so much information already available. I don't know that we promote that enough. It's a little bit like, oh gosh, we need to do something. But there are things that are already in place to help parents and families be safer in the digital world. So yeah, we don't need to go to such controlling measures.
Okay, let's move on to another challenge for families, and that is around the alcohol. They did some surveying, which I just saw published. The survey was done in March, but it's around the issue of alcohol. And basically what they found was that it's probably a bit hard to read where you are, but if you're watching on a computer, you'll be able to see some of the words. But basically what it showed was that 81% support standard age and intoxication checks to online alcohol deliveries. 76% want to limit how much alcohol can be sold in neighbourhoods. 58% want to raise the legal purchase age back to 20. On advertising, 80% said that alcohol ads shouldn't be anywhere near children. In fact, 68% want them phased out from sports advertising. 58% want minimum unit pricing. So in other words, get away with this cheap booze. And 2/3 want mandatory warning labels, health warning labels. So look, it seems like majority support for tightening up the whole regulations around alcohol. I just want to go around the panel and just ask, in what areas do you think we need to toughen up the alcohol laws and regulations, or do you, once again, like social media, is it down to families and personal choice? So, Simon, let's start with you. What do you think?
You had to choose. I'm going to get in trouble with my wife here because we have different views. Look, I'm all for tightening up. Yeah, I'm in more trouble. Here we go. Live on it. No. Advertising, unit pricing, I think makes a lot of sense. I think a slow sinking cap on how many places can sell alcohol makes sense. And why I say slow is I don't think you should just undermine current businesses immediately. Although the bigger issue is the supermarkets. They sell enormous amounts of alcohol. And this is where we get controversial. And you and I, Bob, might have a discussion, but I voted in the past to keep it at 18. And I would still hold. I know.
Sorry, note that down, please. Sorry. Replace Simon with Elliot.
For me, it's always been a consistency issue. I mean, I'd much prefer people, start drinking later. But if you can join the army, if you can get married, and that's 16, if you can vote, for me, it's just a clean and simple line. I see it as arbitrary myself to make it 20. So I'm clearly in trouble with Susie. My wife is probably going to burst through the door again in a moment. But for me, that's a consistency issue. But then it's the wider philosophical issue, and I won't talk much into this, but New Zealand has an obsession around alcohol. And I think all of what we've just touched on doesn't necessarily address that. What is it that's driving people in their more existential state to head to alcohol, drugs, and other things? But there we go. Someone who works for Family First, controversially, has just said he's okay with keeping it 18. I'm going to mute myself now, Bob. And
sorry, Rachel, is that you? Yeah, your husband needs a good hiding. Get the jandal out. Okay. Susie, you live in Manarewa. This is where the alcohol industry. This is where the alcohol industry targets families in lower socioeconomic areas. That's the interesting thing. There's more alcohol outlets in lower socioeconomic areas than in higher ones in richer areas. Do you feel that the community has a say on the whole alcohol issue, or is this a problem that you guys have?
It's a huge problem, and it's so immoral the way, alcohol outlets are around here, and just set up to tempt the masses. I can't see any value in alcohol consumption. I guess I'm a bit of a teetotaler, but I've been around alcohol all my life in terms of just seeing the destruction and decimation of families because of alcohol abuse. I think all of the measures that people are proposing, just use them all. I think raising the purchase age is, to me, I think it's particularly potent. I think youth don't really develop their brains very well until they're 25, and then I don't know, not go for it.
Does it get better?
I think so. I have, kids who range from, is he 26 or 25, right down to 13. I have 18-year-olds. 17-year-old, an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old, and they're driving, and I just couldn't see that they're not exposed to alcohol at all, but I could not see their decision making aided in any way with alcohol. And so I looked into DUI convictions for under 25s over the last over a decade, and note that there's been a consistent decline since the 2011 zero alcohol limit for drivers 20 years and under was enforced and implemented. And now I think that's a great thing. Down from, like, in 2009, 13,000 youths were convicted to last year, only 3,200. So measures like that obviously are effective. And yeah, I'm all for alcohol reforms. Like, just throw them all into the mix.
Yeah, I know one that I've always had an issue with is the loss leading, where the supermarkets make the alcohol very low price to attract people into the supermarket to buy more goods.
Immoral.
And the other thing is the placement of the alcohol. You'll note that in most supermarkets, when you walk in, immediately in eye vision is the alcohol area. So it's very attractive. Michael, what do you think? Do you think this is an area that we need more governmental intervention or more personal responsibility?
Well, Bob, we need both, of course. And look, I tend to agree with Susan. I'd support all these proposed restrictions. I think we've got to make alcohol and its access quite hard for young people, especially. And so all these things, what do you got? Raising the age, restrictions on advertising, minimum unit pricing, and mandatory cancer warning labels. I think that's all good, Bob. I really do. And you see these outlets springing up all over the place, and they're simply not good. They are dreadful, really. And alcohol, I mean, we've known for a very long time, haven't we, in human history, that alcohol is a root cause of a myriad of problems, and it's a gateway to drugs and to violence and family dysfunction. And I just think that the state does actually have a role to play. And so I'd favour all these restrictions, actually.
Okay, Elliot, you're a South Auckland boy. You've seen the harm of alcohol. You've seen the proliferation of it. What legislation would you want to bring in?
This is one time I wouldn't mind you swooping over me. Okay, so we're going to have a divided table here. I have always thought that if you are old enough to defend your nation and go over to overseas and defend your nation, then you have the right to drink beer. I do hold to that. Now, I will say that, yes, it's something that the ratio is something like 3 for every 1 school in South Auckland. It's approximately 3 liquor stores. It's quite atrocious stats. However, I will point out that you've got licensee trusts out there, and every single time a liquor store tries to get a license, it does have to go through a process. So if you look over at West Auckland, the control of alcohol sales is quite extraordinary. It really is nearly a different land when you think about alcohol and the access to alcohol, whether by liquor store or even by supermarket. So I think a strong look will probably need to be done, by the licensee trust. What are they allowing in? How are they allowing so many in South Auckland? In West Auckland, they're really fiercely opposed to a lot of it and control it really well. So I do struggle saying put it back up, simply because I do go back to that. If we've got Kiwis out there who are 18, 19 years old, and they're prepared to go over and defend our freedom in other lands or even in our areas, then they do have a right to have a beer. Yeah, and I know how that's controversial as well.
You want to redeem yourself with some other restriction or something, just to make it sound better?
But I will say, the licensing trusts are supposed to be the agents of barriers to a lot of these things. So I would like to know, why is it that South Auckland licensing trusts are letting so many liquor stores get licenses and just flooding the streets? I think that's a massive problem.
Okay, Simon, your wife just texted me to say that she wants to see you. Do you want to go and see her now, or do you want us to come around and protect you?
I'm literally, if you saw me look down, she says, "You are in trouble."
Yes, good job.
Capital letters.
Well said, Rachel. Yes. Do you want to redeem yourself in some other restriction? I mean, is there some tightening up of the alcohol law which will make you look better?
Yeah, look, ultimately I'm the same as Elliot. It's an age, on the age issue, for me it's a consistency question, but actually it doesn't matter if it's on unit pricing, advertising. Part of it too is around communities taking more control of what can and cannot be there. There's a myriad of things we can do, and we should do. Because actually so many of the social harms that we see in society come back to alcohol. It drives so many problems. And so there's a myriad of things we can do and we should do. And look, to be fair, last quick comment, Parliament, when I was there, grappled with this time and time again.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately a tension between the rights of many people who just enjoy a quiet drink quite happily, and how do we protect those that can't handle it, and then, a lot of our younger ones who suffer because of it. So it's a fraught issue, ultimately. Typical politician's response.
But Bob, I do want to point out one thing, is that at the height of the legal high, that legal weed, when it was going around, you did have lots of stores opened up in South Auckland. But I will point out that over the North Shore, massive swathes of the North Shore areas, the community had gotten together and gone to dairies and said, if you sell these legal highs, we are going to boycott your store. And so they stopped it as well. So I actually think there is a really big one about the community stepping up and saying, taking the communities back. Yeah,
but I am tired of reading reports about alcohol stores opening straight opposite schools or next door to sensitive sites, and it seems like the lobby seems to have a bit of a say. Right, let's move on to, I think this is going to be our final topic actually, and it's not much happier because a report card came out from UNICEF about effectively how well our kids are doing. Let me just show you a couple of quick graphs, team, and then I need some solutions. So firstly, amongst the OECD countries, that is us right down the bottom there, we're fifth to bottom. The problem is that we are the worst for the worst mental health in OECD countries. We've got the highest rate of suicide for 15 to 19-year-olds. Look at the gap there. We're 3 times the average of OECD countries for suicide. When it comes to frequent bullying, we're second highest, and that's bullying of all kids. We're also not doing too well on the health side of things, physical health, third highest. And our kids aren't satisfied. We're the 6th lowest in terms of life satisfaction. I tell you, it's a report card that you just don't want to show your parents when you're in 4th form. So why is it so bad, and what's the solution? Michael, I know you've researched on this. That's what your book's about. That's on my shelf, and I need an update. You need to write a new edition, not the band, a book. How do we solve this problem?
Well, Bob, I just think just hearing you run through those stats, G.K. Chesterton, the great Anglo-Catholic writer of about 100 years ago, said we need to teach the oldest truths to the youngest people. Mm-hmm. And, who can rely on UNICEF, really? Mm-hmm. We know their ideological base. And they're telling us what we can observe all around us. And a few years ago, Bob, actually, when I was working at Maxim, I went to visit Rashan Prasad, who ended up as a Labour list MP. But before that, he had a job with the Families Commission. You may remember that from many years ago. This would be about 2005. And I went to visit him in his high-rise bureaucratic office. I was sitting across the table from him, and he said to me basically what you said, well, what do we do? And I looked him in the eye and he said, well, it's quite simple, really. We need all the structures of government to support the married 2-parent family. And he just looked at me.
His eyes glazed over.
Yeah. As I said, this would do you out of a job and all your lackeys. But seriously, the disintegration, Bob, over many decades, which you and others and Family First, and we understand the disintegration of the 2-parent family. This is not a nostalgic thing. It's a very real thing when we're looking at all these statistics. And so we get a raft of negative impacts on present and subsequent generations, and it all compounds on itself. So we need to start valuing the family again, and that's not some big nostalgic leap backwards. It's actually just real politic and really understanding families and what works and supporting parents. I mean, the best thing that can be done for a child growing up is that the parents love each other and stay together. And But I mean, all this just sounds, so quaint almost, but it's real. And we've got so far away from that now. So we don't need UNICEF churning out more graphs. We know on the ground, we know what's happening in our classrooms, we know what's happening on the streets, we know what's happening in our homes, and that all needs to change. And we need an absolute multi-layered approach to it. And Bob, it'll take many decades, I think, but it is possible. And we've got to hang on to that hope that there can be.
Elliot, it's interesting that these all all our topics sort of fit in, because we started off with bad behaviour. We've talked about the harms of social media. We've talked about the abuse of alcohol and other drugs. And now we're talking about really the outcomes in terms of suicide ideation, unhappiness amongst our young people. I mean, we probably shouldn't be surprised. It's all connected, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And you look at that replacement of Judeo-Christian theory, which we had, the objective morality that we clung to. Well, now we're replacing it with UN agenda items. You look at the disintegration of the family unit, as Michael said, absolutely right. I will say, though, that unfortunately, I think those of us who are in lobby groups, I'm in Hobson's Pledge, we're on Family First here, and there are other groups out there who are doing God's work, who are doing really awesome work. But really, the one thing I would disagree with Michael on is that this can be fixed. It does not take that long to fix it. Helen Clark, I would regard as the person who broke the family unit overall. And we got the 1974 policies that came out, but Helen Clark, I think, really broke it. I don't think it would take that long to fix it. I think it would take a while, maybe a generation, to really to get back into a good, healthy society. But the fix can be done pretty easily. I think it can be done within one campaign. It'll be brave, but it has to be fixed in Parliament, because the policies which led to the disintegration can also lead to the repair and reconstruction of the family unit.
Okay, and I don't think Michael will disagree with you, because it was during Helen Clark's reign that Michael and I would do interviews once a week on a certain radio station. So you wouldn't disagree with that, Michael? I mean, that's really
Absolutely not. Well said, Elliot. Well said.
Yeah. Susie, terrible suicide ideation and suicide rates. Males achieve it more, but females attempt it more. Fortunately, they just don't succeed. But it's just terrible rates, terrible bullying. Kids aren't happy. What's the solution?
I think we need more of the fundamental family unit, but I think I hold out a lot of hope for solo parents, because I think, God says in his word, he puts the lonely in families, and I feel like the solution is getting into good, strong community groups where you feel like you're supported as a parent. You've got resource, you've got people who are going to encourage you when it's hard, and so people need community, people need one another. I also think, I'm going to put a shameless plug here, but we need more Christians on school boards. So the elections are coming up in September, and parents, if you're carrying good, godly values, carry them into school boards, because those are places of great influence. It's a gateway, not just for your own children, but for all children. And, you can, I don't know how many good things we've been able to funnel through to our school, and bad things that we've been able to block just by being involved on school boards here in Manurewa. So get onto school boards and champion families. And this week I get to start a parenting course at my primary school, just because they're, recognise their need for more resource and more skills. And so you can do things like that if you gain the trust and of schools and kura around the country. Get in there, Christians.
Okay, and Simon, I did leave you till last, but I do want to honour you, because when you were in Parliament, you fought against the redefinition of marriage, you fought against the killing of the unborn child. You fought against the euthanasia of vulnerable elderly people and terminally sick. But all those values, they've all been yanked down by Parliament. You fought as hard as you could alongside colleagues. Are we just reaping what we've sown in terms of this type of approach?
Problem is, I didn't fight against lowering the alcohol age to 18 or upping it.
We will forgive you for that one.
It's all wiped out. It's just we're done.
You're allowed to make one mistake, Simon. Okay, one.
Flippancy aside, look, a couple of very quick points. Can I really echo what Susie has said? People need to get involved. If you want to make a change in these areas, it actually starts with each and every one of us. It's our conversations around the family table. It's in our networks. It's at the school board level and so forth. We have to be involved. Secondly, I used to say to my colleagues in Parliament, how's that great progressive experiment working for you? Because actually all the stats show things are in a terrible state. And look, there's no simple silver bullet, but actually stable families, a mum and a dad, make a difference. And look, we all know I'm a stepfather, which means I'm in a family that has been broken. And we do our best to fix and repair that. But it's still not ideal. And I say that again as a step parent. Stable families make a huge difference. And so we just have to keep working at that. Fatherlessness, I'm an ex-prison chaplain. Just about every guy I worked with in the old Mount Eden, the root cause goes back to that. In other words, society, it is exactly what everyone has said here. We have to return to the basics. And until we do, we're going to still see these statistics going. And maybe the last point, Bob, and I mean, you and I talk about, and we see it all the time, our media celebrate in the contrary. So they decry all those stats you put up, but they drive so much of it because they celebrate broken families. They celebrate a culture of excess. And we just got to keep pushing against that. And if I might, I'll just return to where I started, and it's exactly what Susie said, which is really, it's up to each and every one of us and all of those watching tonight to get involved. First and foremost in our own families, but to make sure we're having these strong, confident conversations with our friends and family, joining school boards, joining our professional associations, and actually beginning to bring about a bit of change. And in my particular case, it's now trying to go out after this and explain to my wife on the alcohol stuff. So just again, thank you from me. It's been just a wonderful night.
Okay. We will leave it there because we are out of time. You panellists have done a fantastic job, even you, Simon. And on Thursday night, Simon and I will be back for political playback where it's a day of the budget. So we'll be examining the government budget. The Greens released their budget last week, and it was such a good budget that 8 out of 5 economists thought it was a really good one. So that's it for tonight. Thank you, Elliot, Susie, Michael and Simon. And thank you for watching. The comments have just been literally scrolling through, so we just haven't been able to have time to get to them. But thank you for that. You can check them on our social media feed. Anyway, we will see you next week for Straight Talk. Have a great week.